Good afternoon. This is All India Radio. I am Anubha Rohatgi and with me is Subha Kaul with the Midday News. The headlines. Prime Minister Narendra Modi inaugurates metro rail project in Pune. Also launches and lays foundation stone of various projects in the city. Prime Minister says country must focus on sustainable environment that supports vision of circular economy and encourages green development. All preparations in place for polling for the 7th and the last phase of assembly elections in Uttar Pradesh tomorrow. Home Minister Amit Shah lauds Central Industrial Security Force for its services during the pandemic, attends 53rd Raising Day ceremony of the force in Ghaziabad. Subject Expert Committee on COVID-19 recommends Phase 3 trial of Sputnik Light vaccine as booster dose. Nationwide COVID vaccination coverage touches 178 crore 83 lakh doses mark. Recovery rate stands at 98.66%. Country's first indigenous flying trainer Hansa NG successfully completes sea-level trials. Over a dozen Operation Ganga flights to bring back Indian nationals evacuated from Ukraine today. Russian President Vladimir Putin says West's sanctions on Russia are equivalent to declaring war. In women's cricket, India beat Pakistan by 107 runs in the World Cup encountered at Mount Maunganui in New Zealand. And in Mohali Cricket Test, Indian men take a 400-run lead against Sri Lanka and enforce follow-on. As we start the bulletin, we appeal to our listeners to stay safe from COVID-19 by following these 4 simple steps. Get fully vaccinated, wear a face mask, maintain 2 gaz ki duri for social distancing, focus on hand and face hygiene. And now the news. Prime Minister Narendra Modi today said the country must focus on developing sustainable environment that supports the vision of circular economy, promotes waste to wealth and encourages green development. Mr. Modi said this after laying the foundation stone of rejuvenation and pollution abatement of Mula Mutha River project in Pune, Maharashtra.
21वीं सदी के भारत में हमें अपने शहरों को आधुनिक भी बनाना होगा और उनमें नई सुविधाएं भी जोड़नी होगी। भविष्य के भारत के शहर को ध्यान में रखते हुए हमारी सरकार अनेकों परियोजनाओं पर एक साथ काम कर रही है। हमारी सरकार का प्रयास है कि हर शहर में ज्यादा से ज्यादा ग्रीन ट्रांसपोर्ट हो, इलेक्ट्रिक बसों हो, इलेक्ट्रिक कारें हो, इलेक्ट्रिक 2 पहिया वाहन हो, हर शहर में स्मार्ट मोबिलिटी हो, लोग ट्रांसपोर्ट सुविधाओं के लिए एक ही कार्ड का इस्तेमाल करें, हर शहर में सुविधा को स्मार्ट बनाने वाले इंटीग्रेटेड कमांड एंड कंट्रोल सेंटर हो।
Mula Mutha River rejuvenation will be done in a 9-kilometer stretch of the river at a project cost of more than 1,080 crore rupees.
पहले शिलान्यास होते थे तो पता ही नहीं चलता था कब उद्घाटन होगा। साथियों, ये घटना इसलिए महत्वपूर्ण है कि इसमें ये संदेश भी है कि समय पर योजनाओं का पूरा किया जा सकता है। आज मूला मुठा नदी को प्रदूषण से मुक्त करने के लिए 1100 करोड़ रुपए के प्रोजेक्ट पर भी काम आरंभ हो रहा है। आज पुणे को ई बसें भी मिली है। बानेर में ई बस के डिपो का उद्घाटन हुआ है और इन सबके साथ आज पुणे के अनेक विविधता भरे जीवन में एक सुहाना तोहफा आर के लक्ष्मण जी को समर्पित एक बेहतरीन आर्ट गैलरी म्यूजियम भी पुणे को मिला है।
Earlier in the day, the Prime Minister inaugurated the 12-kilometer stretch of the total 32.2-kilometer Pune Metro Rail project. The entire project is being built at a total cost of more than 11,400 crore rupees. Mr. Modi also inaugurated an exhibition at Garware Metro Station and undertook a metro ride from there to Anand Nagar Metro Station. This metro rail project is an endeavour to provide world-class infrastructure for urban mobility in Pune. The foundation stone of the project was also laid by the Prime Minister on 24th December 2016.
पुणे अपनी सांस्कृतिक, आध्यात्मिक और राष्ट्रभक्ति की चेतना के लिए मशहूर रहा है और साथ ही पुणे ने एजुकेशन, रिसर्च एंड डेवलपमेंट, आईटी और ऑटोमोबाइल के क्षेत्र में भी अपनी पहचान निरंतर मजबूत की है। ऐसे में आधुनिक सुविधाएं पुणे के लोगों की जरूरत है और हमारी सरकार पुणे वासियों की इसी आवश्यकता को ध्यान में रखते हुए अनेक मोर्चों पर काम कर रही है। अभी थोड़ी देर पहले मैंने गरवारे में आनंद नगर तक पुणे मेट्रो में सफर किया है। ये मेट्रो पुणे में मोबिलिटी को आसान करेगी, प्रदूषण और जाम से राहत देगी, पुणे के लोगों की ईज ऑफ लिविंग बढ़ाएगी।
After arriving in Pune, Mr. Modi unveiled the statue of Sri Chakrabarti Shivaji Maharaj on the premises of Pune Municipal Corporation. The statue is made up of 1,850 kilograms of gunmetal and is about 9.5 feet tall. He also launched 100 e-buses and e-bus depot constructed at Banir. Mr. Modi said, the nation is celebrating Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav and Pune has a historic contribution in India's independence. He said earlier today he had the honor of unveiling the statue of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. The Prime Minister said this statue will instill the feeling of patriotism in the youth.
कुछ देर पहले ही मुझे छत्रपति शिवाजी महाराज की भव्य प्रतिमा का लोकार्पण करने का सौभाग्य मिला है। हम सभी के हृदय में सदा सर्वदा बसने वाले छत्रपति शिवाजी महाराज की ये प्रतिमा युवा पीढ़ी में, आने वाली पीढ़ियों में राष्ट्रभक्ति की प्रेरणा जगाएगी। आज पुणे के विकास से जुड़े अनेक अन्य प्रकल्पों का उद्घाटन और शिलान्यास भी हुआ है। ये मेरा सौभाग्य है कि पुणे मेट्रो के शिलान्यास के लिए आपने मुझे बुलाया था और अब लोकार्पण का भी आपने मुझे अवसर दिया है।
The Prime Minister said Pune has strengthened its identity in the cultural, education, IT, research and development sectors. Mr. Modi said we must encourage Nadi Utsav in the cities and districts that will teach the value of water resource.
नदियां फिर से जीवंत होगी तो शहर के लोगों को भी सुकून मिलेगा, उन्हें भी नई ऊर्जा मिलेगी। और मैं तो शहरों में रहने वालों को आग्रह करूंगा कि साल में एक बार तिथि तय करके रेगुलर नदी उत्सव मनाना चाहिए। नदी के प्रति श्रद्धा, नदी का महात्म्य, पर्यावरण की दृष्टि से प्रशिक्षण, पूरे शहर में नदी उत्सव का वातावरण बनाना चाहिए, तब जाकर के हमारे नदियों का महत्व हम समझेंगे।
Governor of Maharashtra Bhagat Singh Koshyari, Union Minister Ramdas Athawale, Deputy Chief Minister Ajit Pawar, Leader of Opposition in Maharashtra Legislative Assembly Devendra Fadnavis, MP Prakash Javadekar, Girish Bapat and others were present on the occasion.
Polling for 7th and last phase of assembly elections in Uttar Pradesh will be held tomorrow. All preparations are in place for 54 constituencies spread over 9 districts going to polls. A total of 613 candidates are in the fray. Campaigning for this phase ended last evening. Senior BJP leader and Prime Minister Narendra Modi held a meeting with the intellectual class of Varanasi yesterday. Mr. Modi also addressed a rally at Khajuri area. Samajwadi Party President Akhilesh Yadav also campaigned in the city yesterday, while Congress General Secretary Priyanka Gandhi Vadra held a road show. A report.
The 9 districts which will go for poll tomorrow are Azamgarh, Mau, Jaunpur, Ghazipur, Chandauli, Varanasi, Mirzapur, Bhadohi and Sonbhadra. These districts are in Purvanchal region of a state which is considered backward. A large section of society is working here in power loom industry, and in recent years, government has tried to develop this industry and promoted also the agriculture products of the region. In political terms, it has a win-win situation for all parties. While Varanasi is in focus because of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Azamgarh is considered as a bastion of Samajwadi Party. Many ministers of state government like Neelkant Tiwari, Anil Rajbhar, Ravindra Jaiswal and Sangeeta Balwant Bind are contesting in this phase. Many important leaders of opposition like Shadab Fatima, Om Prakash Rajbhar and Dara Singh Chauhan are also in fray. Sushil Chandra Tiwari, AIR News, Varanasi.
More than 84% polling was recorded in the second and final phase of assembly elections in Manipur. Voting was held for 22 assembly constituencies spread over 10 districts in this phase yesterday. 92 candidates, including 2 women, were in the fray in this phase. The state had recorded 89% voter turnout in the first phase, which was held on February 28th. Counting of votes will be taken up on 10th of March, along with Uttar Pradesh, Goa, Uttarakhand and Punjab. Home Minister Amit Shah has lauded the role of CISF personnel during the coronavirus pandemic for risking their lives and taking care of fellow Indians who were returning from abroad. Mr. Shah said many CISF personnel have lost their lives in the service of the nation. Mr. Shah said CISF personnel are taking care of returning citizens from Ukraine under Operation Ganga too.
फ्रंटलाइनर वर्कर के रूप में हो, चाहे इस देश के औद्योगिक उत्पादन को निर्बाध तरीके से चलने के लिए, चलते रखने के लिए जिन्होंने अपनी जान गंवाई है, वो सभी को मैं मन से, पूरे बल की ओर से और पूरे देश की ओर से श्रद्धांजलि देना चाहता हूं। आज भी ऑपरेशन गंगा चल रहा है। मैं ऑपरेशन गंगा के जितने भी दृश्य देखता हूं, उसमें मेरे सीआईएसएफ के जवान को जरूर ढूंढता हूं। विनम्रता के साथ चेहरे पर आनंद की लकीरें लिए हुए वो जवान यूक्रेन में फंसे हुए अपने नागरिकों को आते हुए देखता है और संतुष्टि का अनुभव करता है।
Speaking at the 53rd Raising Day ceremony of Central Industrial Security Force CISF at Ghaziabad, Mr. Shah said the $2.5 trillion worth of economy would not have been possible without the service of CISF.
मेरा आग्रह है सीआईएसएफ के सामने भी ढेर सारी क्षितिजें नई नई खुली। $2.5 ट्रिलियन की इकोनॉमी से $5 ट्रिलियन की इकोनॉमी की यात्रा जब होगी तो अब ढेर सारे प्राइवेट सेक्टर में मैन्युफैक्चरिंग इकाइयां, बड़ी बड़ी मैन्युफैक्चरिंग इकाइयां आएंगी। डिफेंस के सेक्टर में, अंतरिक्ष के क्षेत्र के अंदर, ड्रोन के क्षेत्र के अंदर, हर क्षेत्र के अंदर बहुत सारा प्राइवेट औद्योगिक उत्पादन भी आने वाला है। मैं जरूर सीआईएसएफ के डीजीपी को कहूंगा कि एक 5 साल का एक रोड मैप तैयार किया जाए, जिसमें हम सीआईएसएफ को भविष्य के 25 साल के लिए तैयार करें और एक 25 साल का रोड मैप तैयार किया जाए के माध्यम से हम सीआईएसएफ को शताब्दी के वर्ष में सुसज्ज करके परिणाम देने वाली संस्था के रूप में देखें।
The Home Minister also awarded President's Police Medals for meritorious service. CISF DG Sheel Vardhan Singh said the force is playing an important role in the development of the country by being at the forefront of security at the space and atomic energy centers, ports, airports and metro rails. Mr. Singh said over 30 lakh passengers in Delhi Metro and 10 lakh passengers in airports across the country pass through the security of CISF.
The Subject Expert Committee SEC on COVID-19 of the Central Drugs Standard Control Organization has recommended to allow Phase 3 trial of Sputnik Light vaccine as booster dose. The recommendations have been sent to the Drugs Controller General of India, DCGI, for final approval. The DCGI had on February 4th granted emergency use permission to Sputnik Light vaccine in India, subject to certain regulatory provisions. Hyderabad-based Dr. Reddy's Laboratories had presented its proposal to DCGI for conducting the Phase 3 trial of Sputnik Light vaccine as booster dose. Our correspondent, quoting official sources, reports that the government panel reviewed the application after detailed deliberation. It recommended granting permission for the Phase 3 clinical trial with conditions to initiate the trial with Sputnik Light vaccine. The firm is holding emergency use authorization permission for Sputnik Light vaccine in the country with certain regulatory provisions. Sputnik Light vaccine is approved in 29 countries, including Argentina and Russia. Over 178 crore 83 lakh doses of COVID vaccines have been administered in the country under the nationwide vaccination drive so far. The Health Ministry has said more than 26 lakh 19,000 COVID vaccine doses were administered yesterday. In the last 24 hours, India reported 5,476 new COVID cases and 9,754 COVID patients recovered during the same period. The recovery rate now stands at 98.66%.
You are listening to the Midday News on All India Radio. A reminder of the headlines before we move on. Prime Minister Narendra Modi inaugurates metro rail project in Pune, also launches and lays foundation stone of various projects in the city. Prime Minister says country must focus on sustainable environment that supports vision of circular economy and encourages green development. All preparations in place for polling for the 7th and last phase of assembly elections in Uttar Pradesh tomorrow. Home Minister Amit Shah lauds Central Industrial Security Force for its services during the pandemic, attends 53rd Raising Day ceremony of the force in Ghaziabad. Subject Expert Committee on COVID-19 recommends Phase 3 trial of Sputnik Light vaccine as booster dose. Nationwide COVID vaccination coverage touches 178 crore 83 lakh doses mark. Recovery rate stands at 98.66%. Country's first indigenous flying trainer, Hansa NG, successfully completes sea-level trials. Over a dozen Operation Ganga flights to bring back Indian nationals evacuated from Ukraine today. Russian President Vladimir Putin says West sanctions on Russia are equivalent to declaring war. In women's cricket, India beat Pakistan by 107 runs in the World Cup encounter at Mount Maunganui in New Zealand. And in Mohali Cricket Test, Indian men take a 400 runs lead against Sri Lanka and enforce follow-on. For quick news updates round the clock, follow us on our Twitter handle @AIR News Alerts.
चलो मिलकर एक शुरुआत करें, चलो एक फैसला आज करें, मास्क नहीं तो टोकेंगे, कोरोना को रोकेंगे, चलो एक इरादा करते हैं, चलो खुद से वादा करते हैं, मास्क नहीं तो टोकेंगे, कोरोना को रोकेंगे.
Welcome back to the Midday News. Country's first indigenous flying trainer, Hansa NG, has successfully completed the sea-level trials. Designed and developed by CSIR National Aerospace Laboratories, Bangalore, the aircraft completed the trials at Puducherry from 19th February to 5th March. It was flown to Puducherry, covering 140 nautical miles in 1.5 hours at a cruising speed of 155 km per hour on 19th February. The objectives of sea-level trials were to evaluate handling qualities, climb and cruise performance, balked landing, structural performance, power plant and other systems performance. More from our correspondent.
The objectives of sea-level trials were to evaluate handling qualities, climb and cruise performance, bulk landing, structural performance, power plant and other systems performance. CSIR NAL sources said that all the objectives of the sea-level trials are met and aircraft has been ferried back to Bangalore yesterday after completing 18 hours flying at Puducherry. The aircraft was piloted by Wing Commander KB Prakash and Wing Commander Dilip Reddy of ASTE. Hansa NG is one of the most advanced flying trainer powered by a Rotex digital control engine with unique features, just-in-time prepreg, JIP-REG, composite lightweight airframe, glass cockpit, bubble canopy with wide panoramic view and electrically operated flaps. Hansa NG is designed to meet the Indian Flying Club needs and it is an ideal aircraft for commercial pilot licensing due to its low cost and low fuel consumption. With Saubhagyakar, Anupam Mishra, AIR News.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi chaired a high-level meeting on the Ukraine issue last night. The meeting was attended by Union Ministers Dr. S. Jaishankar and Piyush Goyal, along with National Security Advisor Ajit Doval, Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla and other senior officials. Mr. Modi has been continuously holding high-level meetings on the Ukraine crisis since the beginning of the conflict. During the meetings, Mr. Modi has been reviewing the ongoing efforts under Operation Ganga to bring back Indians stranded in Ukraine.
External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar has said 13 flights under Operation Ganga will bring home 2,500 Indian nationals stranded in war-torn Ukraine today. A C-17 aircraft of Indian Air Force landed at Hindon Air Base near Delhi this morning with 210 Indian nationals evacuated from Ukraine. Another batch of passengers from war-hit Ukraine arrived in Mumbai in the early hours today. An Air India Express flight has flown back 182 people, mostly students, studying in Ukraine from Romania's capital, Bucharest. Union Minister of State for Panchayati Raj, Kapil Patil, welcomed them at the airport. More than 13,000 Indian nationals have already returned to India from Ukraine's neighbouring countries under Operation Ganga. Briefing media in New Delhi, External Affairs Ministry spokesperson Arindam Bagchi said 15 flights have landed in the last 24 hours with around 2,900 passengers on board. He said almost all Indians have now left Kharkiv city. Mr. Bagchi said that the main area of focus is now in Sumy of Ukraine and India is in touch with all concerned regarding the possible movements of the students and the best option for it would be a ceasefire. He said for this, India have been strongly pressing the Russian and Ukrainian sides to allow this kind of local ceasefire to create a safe corridor for Indian students. Meanwhile, the Indian Embassy in Ukraine has requested all Indian nationals who still remain in Ukraine to fill up their details contained in a Google form on an urgent basis. The form has been given in the website and social media handle of the embassy. The Indian Embassy in Hungary has announced that it has begun its last leg of Operation Ganga flights today. It said all those students staying in their own accommodation other than arranged by embassy are requested to reach Hungaria's city centre, Rákóczi, in Budapest between 10 a.m. to 12 p.m.
Russian President Vladimir Putin yesterday warned that Ukrainian statehood is in jeopardy and equated the West's sanctions on Russia to declaring war. Putin said if they continue to do what they are doing, they are calling into question the future of Ukrainian statehood, and if this happens, it will be entirely on their conscience. The Russian president also hit out at Western sanctions that have affected his country's economy and sent the value of its currency tumbling. 10 days after Russian forces began their operations, efforts to enforce the temporary ceasefires in Mariupol and the eastern city of Volnovka showed no signs of improvement. Ukrainian officials said Russian artillery fire and airstrikes had prevented residents from leaving before the agreed-to evacuations got underway. Putin accused Ukraine of sabotaging ceasefire efforts. A third round of talks between Russia and Ukraine will take place tomorrow, according to David Arakhamia, a member of the Ukrainian delegation. The previous meetings were held in Belarus and led to the failed ceasefire agreement to create humanitarian corridors for the evacuation of children, women and older people from besieged cities, where pharmacies have run bare, hundreds of thousands face food and water shortages, and the injured have been succumbing to their wounds. 5 Border Security Force BSF personnel were killed after one of them indiscriminately opened fire at his colleagues earlier this morning in Punjab's Amritsar. The shooter, identified as Constable Satappa SK of 144 Battalion, was among those who died in the incident. Another personnel is also injured and in a critical condition. The incident took place at the force's mess in the Khasa area about 20 kilometers short of the Atari-Wagah border crossing line along the India-Pakistan international front. In the firing, 2 Jawans were killed at the spot, while 3 succumbed to their injuries during treatment at the hospital, where they were taken for treatment immediately after the incident.
As our nation celebrates the 75th year of independence, a series of events are being organized by the government as a part of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. To commemorate the occasion as a Jan Utsav, All India Radio News brings its listeners a special quiz on India's freedom movement and its glorious history. The quiz is being conducted every Monday and Tuesday in morning news since 16th August and will continue till 15th August 2022. The next question of Amrit Mahotsav quiz will be shared with listeners tomorrow in the morning news. And now let's listen to our special program Azadi Ka Safar, highlighting the importance of the day during the freedom struggle.
Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav.
Azadi Ka Safar with AIR News, Birth of a Nation.
India's glorious freedom struggle is one of the greatest struggles the modern world has ever witnessed. AIR News brings you a glimpse of the struggle every day.
বারুদ ভরা স্বপ্ন বুকে স্বাধীন হবে দেশ রে স্বাধীন হবে দেশ ও মা তোর ছেলেরা ঘর ছেড়েছে.
In today's episode, we remember revolutionary freedom fighter Ambika Chakrabarti, who died on the 6th of March 1962. He was a member of the Indian Republican Army, which was led by Masterdar Surya Sen. He later became a member of the Chittagong Jugantar Party.
বারুদ ভরা স্বপ্ন বুকে স্বাধীন হবে দেশ রে স্বাধীন হবে দেশ.
On the 18th of April 1930, Chakrabarti led a group of independence activists who damaged the whole communication system in the region of Chittagong. He became severely injured in a gunfight against the British Indian Army in Jalalabad on the 22nd of April 1930, but managed to escape. A few months later, Ambika Chakrabarti was detained by the British police from his hiding place and was sentenced to death after the trial.
Later, the death sentence was altered to transportation for life to the cellular jail in Port Blair. After independence, Ambika Chakrabarti joined politics and continued to serve people till his death in 1962. We salute the great nationalist.
We also remember the freedom fighter Moturi Satyanarayana, who died on the 6th of March 1995. An ardent Gandhian, Moturi participated in the Quit India movement of 1942.
After India became independent, Moturi was a member of the Constituent Assembly of India from 1948 to 1950. He served as a member of the Committee of the Indian Constitution for its language section. Moturi was twice nominated to Rajya Sabha. He was also a member of the Madras Legislative Council and the Central Advisory Board of Education of the Government of India.
Moturi actively worked towards promoting the Hindi language in the southern part of India from 1936 to 1961. He had joined the Dakshin Bharat Hindi Prachar Sabha as a volunteer and gradually became the secretary and principal secretary of the organization. He was the editor of Hindi Pracharak, Hindi Prachar Samachar and Dakshina Bharat. He organized many institutions all over India such as Dakshina Bharat Hindi Prachar Sabha of Madras and was the founding secretary of Telugu Bhasha Samiti of Madras and Hyderabad.
Moturi was a recipient of the Padma Shri Award in 1954 and the Padma Bhushan Award in 1962. Andhra University honoured him with its Kala Prapurna Award in 1977. We salute the great Indian.
We also remember martyrs Bal Mukund Khuda Bakhsh of Delhi and Shiv Ghulam Dubey of Haryana, who participated in the First War of Indian Independence in 1857. They were executed by hanging on the 6th of March 1858. We salute the great sons of the soil.
That brings us to the end of this episode of Azadi Ka Safar with AIR News. See you in the next episode tomorrow.
In Women's Cricket World Cup, India has defeated Pakistan by 107 runs in their opening encounter at the Bay Oval in Mount Maunganui in New Zealand. India scored 244 runs, losing 7 wickets. Smriti Mandhana, Snehi Rana and Pooja Vastrakar scored half-centuries each to propel the innings total past the 240-run mark. In reply, Pakistan were bowled out in 37 overs with a score of 137 runs. Indian skipper Mithali Raj has become the first woman cricketer to feature in 6 ODI World Cups. Sports Minister Anurag Thakur has congratulated Indian women's cricket team on their victory. In the Mohali men's cricket test, Sri Lanka were 120 for 4 at tea, trailing by 280 runs in their second innings against India. Earlier, the hosts bowled out Sri Lanka for just 174 before enforcing the follow-on on day 3 of the first test. Ravindra Jadeja, who scored unbeaten 175, shined with the ball too, as he removed 5 Lankan wickets for just 41 runs. Ashwin and Bumrah have taken 2 wickets each. Yesterday, India declared their first innings at 574 for 8. And now, before we end the bulletin, the headlines once again. Prime Minister Narendra Modi inaugurates metro rail project in Pune, also launches and lays foundation stone of various projects in the city. Prime Minister says country must focus on sustainable environment that supports vision of circular economy and encourages green development. All preparations in place for polling for the 7th and last phase of assembly elections in Uttar Pradesh tomorrow. Home Minister Amit Shah lauds Central Industrial Security Force for its services during the pandemic, attends 53rd Raising Day ceremony of the force in Ghaziabad. Subject Expert Committee on COVID-19 recommends Phase 3 trial of Sputnik Light vaccine as booster dose. Nationwide COVID vaccination coverage touches 178 crore 83 lakh doses mark. Recovery rate stands at 98.66%. Country's first indigenous flying trainer Hansa NG successfully completes sea-level trials. Over a dozen Operation Ganga flights to bring back Indian nationals evacuated from Ukraine today. Russian President Vladimir Putin says West's sanctions on Russia are equivalent to declaring war. In women's cricket, India beat Pakistan by 107 runs in the World Cup encounter in New Zealand. And in Mohali Cricket Test, Indian men take a lead of 400 runs against Sri Lanka and enforce follow-on. And with that, we end the Midday News.